It was early in the war in Afghanistan. U.S. forces were scattered throughout the country, taking on a range of dangerous missions in an attempt to root out Taliban forces hiding in the rugged, cave-filled mountains. In the region near Kandahar, a group of U.S. Army Special Forces soldiers were dispatched to locate a missing unit that had gone silent. The missing unit had last reported from a mountainous area known for its treacherous terrain, riddled with caves and craggy cliffs. Contact with them had abruptly ceased, and efforts to re-establish communications were unsuccessful. In this remote part of Afghanistan, communication problems were common. But complete radio silence for such an extended period raised alarms. The team tasked with the search was highly trained, elite soldiers accustomed to navigating dangerous environments and handling all manner of threats. They expected a possible insurgent ambush or equipment failure, standard risks in a war zone. But what they would soon encounter was unlike anything they had faced before. The soldiers reached the designated location after a helicopter drop and began their ascent into the mountains. As they climbed higher, the terrain grew more challenging, and visibility was limited by the rocky outcroppings and shadowy caves that littered the landscape. Moving cautiously, they eventually arrived at a spot where they found signs of the missing unit. Scattered across the ground were pieces of military equipment, a rifle, a helmet, torn body armor, along with footprints leading toward the entrance of a large, ominous cave carved into the mountainside. The silence was unsettling. There were no signs of a battle, no shell casings, no bodies, no blood. Yet the scattered gear suggested something had gone very wrong. As they continued to advance, an overwhelming, rancid stench started to emanate from the cavern. Then they heard it, the sound of what seemed to be heavy footsteps echoing from within the cave. At first they thought it might be their missing comrades or perhaps Taliban fighters, but what emerged from the darkness was neither. Standing before them was a creature out of legend, a giant, at least 12 feet tall, with long fiery red hair, a grotesque snarl on its face, and wielding an enormous spear. The creature moved with terrifying speed, and before anyone could react, it hurled its spear with deadly precision, striking one of the soldiers with enough force to lift him off the ground. Panic set in for a moment, but the remaining soldiers quickly regained their composure, unleashing a barrage of high-caliber rounds from their rifles. The soldiers were facing something beyond their training, beyond anything they had ever expected. The giant charged again, and it was clear they were in a fight for their lives. Round after round finally took its toll. The giant let out a deafening roar as it staggered, and with one final shot, it fell to the ground with a thunderous crash. The soldiers were left standing in stunned silence. One of their own was dead, and lying before them was a creature that, by all accounts, should not exist. After confirming the giant was dead, the soldiers quickly radioed for extraction. They knew this was beyond the scope of any typical mission. Within hours, helicopters arrived, not only to evacuate the team, but also to transport the body of the giant. Securing the massive corpse was no small task. It took multiple soldiers to lift and maneuver it. The giant's body was flown out, presumably to be studied or hidden away. Once the team was back at base, a rapid debrief followed. The surviving soldiers were ordered to stick to a basic account. They had engaged an unknown hostile in a cave, lost one man, and neutralized the threat. They were warned not to discuss the specifics of what had happened or what they had seen. As for the giant's body, it was taken by a separate team and never seen again. The details of where it was transported and what was done with it remain classified to this day. The soldiers were left with more questions than answers. No official report of the incident was ever filed, and the mission's details were sealed. So, what exactly happened in that cave in Kandahar? Was it a descendant of an ancient race that had managed to survive in the isolated mountains of Afghanistan? Others point to the many legends and myths across various cultures about giants. From the Bible's Nephilim to Greek mythology's Titans, the idea of giants roaming the earth is not new. Could this giant have been one of these mythological beings, somehow surviving into modern times? Then there's the theory that the U.S. military knew about the existence of these giants long before the encounter in Kandahar. According to this line of thinking, the Special Forces team was not sent on a routine rescue mission, but was instead dispatched to eliminate a known threat. Skeptics, of course, offer a more mundane explanation. They suggest that the soldiers were under extreme stress, perhaps suffering from exhaustion or the effects of high altitude, and that they may have misinterpreted what they saw. Despite the lack of official recognition, the story of the Giant of Kandahar refuses to fade away. It's become a modern-day legend, passed around in military circles and whispered about on internet forums. The soldiers involved have largely remained silent, either due to the classified nature of the mission or the stigma of being associated with such a fantastical story. But anonymous accounts and leaked details continue to surface, fueling speculation and intrigue. Regardless of how the event is perceived, the men saw something that day in the mountains of Kandahar. Something that defied explanation, something that shouldn't have existed. And whether or not the world ever learns the full truth, the legend of the Giant of Kandahar will endure, casting a shadow over those desolate mountains, where ancient secrets still lie buried beneath the rock and sand.